Ready to begin? Let's check the live stream. Just waiting for the live stream to come up. Morena koutou, no mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Good morning everyone. Welcome councillors, staff and to Sharon for the Community and District Development Committee meeting on Tuesday the 12th of December, your worship online. Just a note that the meeting is being live streamed. Just a reminder, councillors, about your mobile phones. Thank you. We'll intend to take a break about 11 if we don't finish before then, and then following the conclusion of this meeting we will have the infrastructure and environment meeting. Councillor Maxwell, would you like to open our meeting with the karakia, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Lani was doing the karakia this morning, but I'll do it for her, from her relation from Ngāti Whakaue who composed this. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e hui e.
Kia ora, Councillor Maxwell, for the karakia. Call for any apologies. I do have an apology for lateness from Councillor Wang, who will be joining us on Zoom later this morning. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Waru for lateness, and I have an apology from Councillor O'Brien. If there are no other apologies, can I have a mover and a seconder for those apologies, please? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, thank you, that is carried. Are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Any urgent items that are not on the agenda? No, thank you. Moving now to page 6 of your agenda, councillors. That's for the confirmation of the minutes of the Community and District Development Committee held on the 8th of November. I think that's Councillor Kiriopa's just joined us online. Morena, Councillor Kiriopa.
Morena.
We're just at page 6 on the agenda, so I'm asking for a mover and a seconder that the minutes be confirmed as a true and correct record. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Seconded by Councillor Barker. Are there any matters for correction? No. If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. That is carried. Moving now to our first presentation of the day. So today on the agenda we've got two items: the events strategy and commercialisation of the Sir Howard Morrison Centre. So the presentation will set the context for these two reports. So welcome to Sharon von Gerlich, to Thomas and to Andrew. Are you?
Just give him the clicker.
Thomas, I'll leave you to do the introductions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors and your worship on Zoom. A slight change. We have broken the presentation into two. So the first presentation will be on the events strategy, which will be that agenda item, and then we've got a second presentation that can lead into the commercialisation paper. So just a bit of context, about 4 to 6 months ago, and back on the feedback that we had from councillors around our event strategy and the commercialisation of some of our assets, we engaged SVG Unlimited, or Sharon Van Gulik, who has a wealth of experience in New Zealand with a range of events, venues, and I'll leave it for Sharon to introduce herself with regards to her background. And what she has done is worked with our organisation, interviewed staff, looked at a range of documents, financial information, strategies, and has given us an executive summary with regards to an overview with regards to what the challenges are and what the opportunities are. And so with that, I'm happy to hand over to Sharon.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. It's lovely to see some familiar faces around the council chamber and some new ones. So kia ora koutou. So I've been involved in events for many, many years. Starting with leading up the Millennium Celebration some almost 25 years ago, but and many years in advising around facilities as well. So let me walk you through, if that's acceptable to you, the work that we've done. The first is an overview of work that was completed actually at the end of 2021 on a review of the major events strategy, and that sets the context for the review of venues. So I'm going to zip through things relatively quickly, and with your approval, Madam Chair, I'll take questions at the end of the presentation. So if you're happy to grab notes, unless you feel there's an immediate need to halt me and clarify something, please feel free to do so. So first of all, in the event context, when we started this piece of work, you did have a major event strategy at the time, and it had a number of objectives around showcasing events, iconic events, and the categorisation of major events that you looked to invest in at the time. It also had kind of rationale for investment, and they were around economic growth, showcasing Rotorua, community engagement, and building capability. You also had a number of policies that impacted them, which was a challenge in itself. So you had a plethora of policy actually, from the major events policy through to a sports event policy, an arts strategy, an arts and culture event strategy, a Rotorua Nui event platform, and while no policy for events, you had a history of attracting them to the city. At that time as well, the council was, across all of its many budget areas, investing on our calculations some $6 million annually in a plethora of these events. Now, it's really important to note, this isn't a little bum budget line item sitting here somewhere that says events investment. This is everything you did, whether it be the supporting infrastructure, your road closures, your facilitation across council, and everything you did to invest in and support events and subsidies, whether it was standing up your markets, everything you did, your Christmas parades and the like. And that comprised about $3.5 million of direct investment at the time, some other what I would call event-related direct expenditure, and about $1 million in people costs. It didn't take into account at the time what I call VIK, which is what we call value in kind, which is indirect people time, like corporate volunteering, venues provided at discounts, and services included in core budgets like maintenance and cleaning. So I think the important thing to note there is, a material investment, but not particularly well structured. We identified at the time about 3 really big opportunities we felt to leverage. The first was this extraordinarily unique positioning of Rotorua, and the work was underway then, is now complete, around the Rotorua Destination Management Plan, which had some really clear directives about how events could support that work. A need to really balance investment and benefits for all. There was I guess, a tendency to invest more in sport. Not a problem with that, but it didn't seem to have a cohesive, similar approach to investment in broader arts and culture. And there was an opportunity from our perspective to rebalance the portfolio and to broaden the benefits, in particular to brand Rotorua and destination Rotorua. And I think, thirdly, you had at the time, a great portfolio of events. So there was lots of opportunity to build on that, and in some respects to refresh the thinking. So what we did is we pulled together, this is a very brief overview, we pulled together a summary of recommendations to better support that investment. And in particular, we wanted to bring together these issues we identified, everything from a lack of aligned strategy to lack of diversity in offering, and relatively short-term thinking actually around event investment at the time, to develop a more comprehensive strategy that gives you really clear objectives for investment, that has criteria that supports that, and even recommended some levels of investments across that, that resource, and in particular a transition and procurement plan to get you to where you wanted to be, to get you to a future state. So that's what the event strategy sought to do. We proposed at the time four key objectives I'm just looking at where I am on yours. 4 key objectives for investing in events. The primary 2 objectives at the time recommended were around economic growth and building brand Rotorua. Economic growth as measured by visitation, by employment, by sponsorship and investment, i.e. bringing new monies into Rotorua, and the net benefit of the event, but as assessed independently, importantly. In respect to building brand Rotorua, it was around reinforcing the unique Rotorua character and spirit, and that was the work of the Destination Management Plan in particular at the time. Having a regard for satisfaction in the actual event delivery, some positive media coverage arising from it, engagement, real engagement in the event, not just impressions or views, and visitor perception around living and visiting and doing business in Rotorua. So they were the primary objectives from the strategy. And they were supported by 2 secondary objectives, the first of which was to engage the community, in particular to build community pride, identity, cohesion and inclusion, and to be measured, as you do actually measure in your currently around pride, livability and participation actually of residents in those events. The 4th objective was a new one. The others were kind of represented in the previous work, but this was probably quite new, and to the extent that it was important that investment also supported your prioritisation of sector investment at the time. So, you know, what do you see as your kind of unique opportunities here? So, in particular in sport, but it was around you know, leveraging unique capital and supporting the position of the home, this idea of a home of Māori sport. Not sure that's as relevant today, I have to say, but at the time that was an important driver. Arts and culture, and that was very much a focus of the performing arts sector, which is something you've brought to life, actually, latterly with the work and appointing specialists into that space. And thirdly, business events with a real focus on Indigenous culture, including film, forestry and forest-based sciences, geothermal, environmental, and health and wellness. And of course, those would be measured by purely GDP growth by sector in the region. So as a result, we recommended events that we should be actually investing in, and they were across 4 categories: sporting events, but those that do deliver on your unique positioning, arts and cultural events that deliver on your position as the centre of Māori arts and culture. Community and CBD revitalisation was again a new kind of thread that came through, because actually you were investing substantially in this area anyway, just not within the construct of this policy, and that was about creating a sense of place and connecting and supporting the community. And then fourthly, business events, which is really about leveraging what is an extraordinary and quite unique accommodation and venue offering outside, but focusing on doing so outside the peaks that you have now. So really focusing on an off-peak strategy to drive greater value into Rotorua. So don't try to get more events here when you're already chocker kind of approach. Underpinned by manaakitanga, a high quality events and venues and open spaces, a wide range of accommodation offerings and price points, very strategic relationships, which you do have with tourism, travel and event stakeholders. And what you didn't have was a long-term strategy in a bidding and sales leadership. So we pulled this all together by developing a kind of what I call a framework for investment. And it kind of recommended, I'm going to explain this in a minute because it's terrible to look at just like this, so sorry about that. But it's about providing some guidance to actually cleverly look at, of the pie you've got, how do you allocate it to deliver on those strategic outcomes, and how do you spend the money? And so what we recommended at the time was a 3-tier level of investment. Tier 1 would be events that you would invest in that would deliver on all 4 outcomes. They would position Rotorua both domestically and internationally. They'd provide net benefit of over $1 million per annum. They'd create media interest in digital following in New Zealand and internationally. They would attract visitors, participants or attendees from around New Zealand and overseas. And we were proposing that you would have 2 events in that space, one that would be in the sports space potentially, and one in arts and culture. That was the recommendation. And that you would spend 40% of your investment on those events. Tier 2 would deliver on 3 or more outcomes, and so there's a slight tweaking on those, on what they would deliver on. So they would be positioning Rotorua domestically with the potential to do so internationally, provide a lower net benefit, creating media interest, but mainly in New Zealand, with potential internationally, but really focusing on New Zealand, and attracting visitors from around New Zealand with high levels of Rotorua engagement and participation. And we thought there was potential to invest in between up to about 11 events in that space, 3 sport, 3 arts, and 1 event in each priority sector, if you wanted to take that approach, and using again 30% of the investment fund. And Tier 3 was delivering on 2 or more outcomes. And this is really around the community event proposition. This is around things that are primarily of benefit to the local community and around the region. There'd be no limit to those events, but you would certainly limit your investment in them, and you might give a lot of little bits to a lot of people in a lot of events. Was the idea behind that. In addition to that, there was a need to ensure that those other community events that do happen do still receive what we would have called low-level event facilitation and support. And that's that value in kind support from council, whether it be collecting rubbish or cleaning or access to open spaces. That these events, importantly, are not candidates for event investment. So you don't invest in these events per se, but they still need to demonstrate that they meet some form of event criteria, and they have to be delivered to an acceptable standard to protect brand Rotorua. The idea then to support all this was the establishment of an event permitting office, so an office that would actually, every event that was staged in Rotorua would come through, that enables them to go through the right processes and the right places within council, facilitated by one team, by one point of entry. Again, just to be more efficient and effective and make sure that everything came through one space, was properly managed across council. And in return for the support, those low-level events would be required to provide some really core metrics, just simply how many people came, and was there any media coverage and the like. So pretty simple levels of support. Finally, the report had some key recommendations around supporting structure and capability. From a people perspective, it was around securing event expertise, particularly in the event bidding space, and cross-functional leadership and collaboration, upweighting your event sales and bidding, making sure that within RLC venues you have event delivery specialists and producers of events, that you have some insights and review capability so people can actually do that kind of analysis, understand where the gaps are and go looking, that you support with the event services you need, especially around marketing and making the most of that investment, and then agreements, just simply getting the legal sorted as well, because some of these are big investments and they need to be supported appropriately. From a process perspective, it was around establishing this event permitting office. It was about refining the event management tool that you had in place, agreeing core metrics for all events, and having new agreements in place. There was also a recommendation that we should review venues at the time to make sure they were fit for purpose for hosting these events. And we concluded simply with recommendations around agreeing that overall strategy and those new objectives, completing work on the structure and capabilities, and assessing current event investment. I think importantly, when you decide to take on a new strategy, you've got to transition out of where you are. So that means, sadly, moving folks that might have previously received investment and funding off the investment schedule and attracting those events that actually are aligned to strategy and are delivering the outcomes that you actually want to be investing in, which is a really challenging thing to do, but really essential piece of work that would, in my estimation, would have taken a couple of years. So that's the first piece of work that was done, the first summary. Is it appropriate to...
Yeah, maybe if we just take questions at this point, unless Andrew or Thomas, if you've got any further comments that you wish to make around the event strategy?
No, Madam Chair, happy to take questions.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. Just going back to one of the earlier slides, you talked about value in kind not being included in the assessment of their value that council invested.
Yeah.
So if that had been included, because there is a cost associated with that, that's staff going out and using their time, our petrol, etc., to change bins or do whatever is required. So that investment would actually have been much larger, wouldn't it?
Yes, I would think so, but I don't know that it would have been, you're not talking the same amount again. You're talking probably 10% of maybe your direct investment, I would have thought. I don't think it would have been more than that, but it's still an important measure. Ironically, the biggest part of it would have been venue discounts. Just so you know, the people cost, I think the people direct VRK would have been pretty small.
Right. So going forward, you talked about value in kind being part of the lower tier events as well. Given that our resources are becoming more and more stretched, we'd have to be very careful about how much of that we can allocate given the sparseness that we have at the moment. So that'd have to be kept in mind. And there was just one other question. With regards to the clashing of dates, I think you touched on avoiding the peak season, etc. If we're going to be injecting significant funds, do you think it would be smart to have that built in as part of the criteria, that we actually have a fair bit of leverage to say, well, if you want to bring your event here, we'd love to have you here, but it needs to be in this period, not here?
Yes, I do. You may have to do quite a lot of work on that. So at the end of the day, there's two types of events. Events you desperately want to have here, that because they just absolutely meet all your objectives and meet meet the profile of what you've got to offer and leverage your unique, beautiful spaces that you've got. But then you've also got to balance that with the fact that if you've got full beds, what's the point if you don't deliver economic return? That's why you need that that insight and analysis, and you need that kind of thoughtful, strategic bidding kind of process. You can go out to market and actually say to people, there's an opportunity to come and stage an event in Rotorua. This is what we're looking for. You might have a number of promoters lining up and saying, well, how would we work with you to deliver on that? So it was about being really proactive and delivering on, your overall priorities really for investment and delivering the right outcomes.
One subsequent, based on that, would you see there being a need to be a little bit flexible and a bit reactive when opportunities arise? For example, Lake Taupo has just said goodbye to the offshore powerboat racing that's supposed to be happening. It had been confirmed for months because of the threat of the gold clam. Now, I can remember back in the 90s or 2000s, we had them here on Lake Rotorua. I'm not saying that that's what we're going to do, but if this opportunity arose, we could say, hang on a minute, team, I know it's only a few months out. This could be a great opportunity. Let's go for it. Do you think we should have that flexibility built in?
Yes, I do, but I think at the end of the day, you've got to decide on what your investment needs to be, and you also need to have the courage to say no. It's very easy to say yes. It's far harder to say no and to be really strategically aligned. I think that if you're going to take opportunities like that, it should be because they meet those criteria. If they don't, my recommendation would be not to do it. Fair enough. A hard call, I know, but you either have policy and strategy,
or you don't.
Or you don't.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Barker, followed by Her Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the comprehensive report and work that you've done. It's really great to see, a direction headed, out in front of us. And just speaking about the strategy and the 4 new objectives that you've identified, particularly I want to talk about number 4, enable sector development and the business events development. I noticed that consideration and focus has been put on Indigenous culture, forestry and forest sciences, geothermal, environmental, health and wellness. Did you do any work or look into consider the agribusiness sector in this picture, because they contribute quite a significant amount to this local economy, and they do sometimes bring some decent size events to this town? So I just noticed, was any work done?
No, so I should just clarify. I think that this is where I hand over to, because all I reflected was your current council-led sector strategy prioritisation at the time. So I think it's important to note these were the priorities back in 21. They may have changed. So my apologies, but that just reflected that moment in time.
Thank you.
Through the chair, so certainly we did. We continued, obviously, where those opportunities arise to pursue them, but I think we also reflected, where particularly agriculture and agribusiness kind of sat in relation to, say, some of our neighbours over in Hamilton, and so this was, what are those areas where we can really kind of leverage a point of difference. So that was certainly the focus at the time, and continues to be what kind of drives us in terms of the international space as well.
Thank you.
Your Worship, the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Look, thank you very much for the great presentation. You have identified a number of improvements that we can make, some gaps that are currently in there, so very much looking forward to improving that and building on the opportunities for Rotorua. I just had a question around economic growth. We have experienced at times where we have two major events. I think of when we had the Tarawera Ultra Marathon and also the NRL All-Stars game, where unfortunately sometimes if they're on the same weekend, we don't maximise that economic potential of the accommodation. So I just wonder where the connection is there to ensure that when we do attract events, even if it is one tier 1 event and one tier 3 event, that we're also working alongside our accommodation providers to ensure that there is the capacity, understanding that at any one time, many of our hotels may be hosting a major conference or business event. So I just wanted to know whether you had any advice on ensuring that there is that economic growth or benefit, and will this new event strategy also incorporate a connection or relationship with the accommodation sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor. So first of all, this is why an event permitting office becomes a really critical part of your operation. That means you have visibility of every event in the region, not just those that are actually led or invested in by council. That's the point of it. And so if you have one point, then you can actually have that, immediately have that lens of, well, what is our capacity, what is happening at this time, and you've got a good judgment call to make on that. Clashes are challenging. I think at the end of the day, what we would encourage is for you not to have them. And to make really, and if you do decide to proceed with a clash, to be really clear why you're doing it, because it's inconsistent with your strategy overall. But that event permitting office would solve a lot of those issues for you, and the purpose of that would be to know, to your point, what is happening in the broader district outside of council. I agree with you, because it's not just what you do; it's what happens in your community that you need to understand. Agreed.
Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. Can I just get some clarity around the 4 objectives that we saw? I understand that was from the 2021 strategy. So are they still? I couldn't really hear very well. Are they still the objectives, the current objectives?
Are they still the current?
For you, Madam Chair, yes, they are. Yes.
Okay, so I've got a question. Thank you. I see that the objective 4, enable sector development, includes supporting the positioning of Rotorua as a home of Māori sport, arts and culture, enhancing Rotorua's reputation as the heart of Māori cultural expression, and business events development, a focus on Indigenous culture, including film. And I just wonder, I didn't see within the people, processes, investment part of your presentation whether or not there were connections or relationships or any investment towards Māori representation to ensure those objectives.
Do you want to speak to that?
No, that is correct, Councillor. The presentation is not dealing with how the council organisation will align itself to the delivery of this. It's more focused on this is the strategy and do you endorse it, and then there is probably internal work around making sure that we've got our resources in the right place. And I think as was presented, I think there's opportunity that as an organisation we do invest approximately $6 million a year across the whole area into this, and so that's I think for us to explore and look into how best to deliver that.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sharon, it's good to see you again. Always good to see you. For my colleagues, Sharon and we worked together in 2010 in Sydney in the pre-lead up to the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand a year later. I think we helped New Zealand win the World Cup at that time. But no, very good to see you, and and your presentation this morning was great. Look, I'd love to talk all morning about it, but the 4 that you highlighted, I tautoko, I support what you do have there regarding events. Can I touch on sport and culture first of all? First of all, inter-sport out of court, and the same in the art and culture area. We are fortunately, we do have things that are happening now. The national secondary schools, Waka Ama, come here every year for a whole week and they love it. And also, if I could touch on one of our successes, the New Zealand Maori versus the Indigenous rugby league game that was held here. It wasn't just the game on the Saturday, it was the lead up from the Monday onwards, from the Pōhiri at Tamate Kapua through to the players going out to the schools and all the lead up to it, and televised around not only New Zealand but Australia. It did us the world of good, and I loved it. I went to the Maori Sports Awards in Tauranga recently, and many of the ones who received accolades or awards, especially the ones who were involved, they commented on the year they've had. And they commented how it all began at Rotorua at the Maori Indigenous Games, right through their whole year. That really lifted them. And they even commented that part of the campaign that went so well up the Wā's really developed here.
Councillor Maxwell, have you got a question?
I wanted to lead into some of the things before I do ask my questions. I did write something down in that here, but no, the sport and culture I do like. The question I had was along a similar lines to what Councillor Patterson said, the VIK, the value in kind. The things I touched on, do you agree that sport and art and culture is one of the things that the value in kind that adds to whatever might come forward in the business development area?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but I think at the end of the day, when I'm talking value in kind, I'm thinking probably sadly separately from you, more of a commercial lens around it, around what is the actual, I guess, resource / cost, what is the time cost invested in events separately, rather than the, I guess, the more values position that you're coming from, which I also share and agree that they're very important for our communities and general well-being. But I guess my task was more to assess investment from wearing more of a commercial, probably real dollars and cents lens than a kind of community outcome lens at the time. But I see value in both. Don't get me wrong. It's just one is around a way to measure non-direct investment in events.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm not sure who would like to address this, but in the Tier 1, we're talking about one event in sport and one in arts and culture. Is that a budgetary constraint that's asking us to think about one, or is it?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's budgetary.
Yes. I mean, if you wanted to, treble your investment, you could probably look at a couple of them, I'd suggest. It's probably more, it was really looking at the resource you had and where you were investing and the number of events you were investing in already. If we'd populated, which we did, populated that framework, you would have seen a lot of events at Tier 1, probably, in your Tier 1, not in my recommended Tier 1, 4 or 5. And then you would have seen a huge number at Tier 3, where you probably needed to be freeing up and investing as in your Tier 2, where you get that better, that more national, that broader brand value and destination value for Rotorua. And Tier 1 gives you that international presence and kind of brand that really puts you on the map, so to speak, that invites investment from NZ Inc. more broadly, leveraging around Tourism New Zealand and NZTE and the like. So it was really about trying to give you a balanced portfolio in respect to the dollars that you had. Now, look, at the end of the day, numbers are arbitrary. At the end of the day, if you've got the resource and you decide to have 3 or 4 at Tier 1 and very few at Tier 2, no problems whatsoever. It was really about giving you a framework to rethink about how you were approaching things.
Okay, thank you. It's a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Sharon, then would there be, and we had 6 million in 2021, and I know you've said just depending on what resources you've got, but is there an ideal investment fund size? Sorry to put you on the spot.
So I think it's important to note this is not an investment fund. I hear you, thank you. But I think at the time, I think your investment fund was about $500,000 that you proactively used to kind of attract and bid for and invest in events, but you were actually spending directly another $3 million. And that was what you were doing anyway as part of your, within all of your budgets and various teams and various deliveries, whether it was through the sport development team or your arts team and the like. So is there a magical number? Probably not. If you said we would rather have, it's probably easier to go the other way and say if we wanted to invest in 3 or 4 kind of Tier 1 major events, what additional resource would we need to invest? That would be an easier question to answer, and there would be another probably $1 to 2 million. So to give you a sense, is that more helpful?
Could I ask it a different way then?
Sure.
So you talked about a long-term bidding strategy.
Yes.
So then how would, I know you've got those other parameters up there, which is the outcomes that we want, but then how do we identify those opportunities that we should actually go out and bid for?
So by assessing what you've got right now. So by literally assessing everything that you're investing in now, plotting them on that framework and seeing where your gaps are, and then looking to where the timing, where the opportunities are. So it was very clear, for instance, that you didn't have a Tier 1 event in the arts and cultural space at the time. You did have one that met that criteria and for sport, and that would be Crankworks. And that was actually delivering it. And the reason it was delivering it was because of the international impact. And you've got to understand we're talking here about, that's the difference you see between events that have got good New Zealand following and good New Zealand broad engagement and media coverage. But when international was a whole step change, that was the event then that was probably delivering that materially for you. So it's about identifying gaps, and then what you do is you say, well, who's out there? At the end of the day, if you've got specialist staff who know what they're doing, they know what's happening in the event space. They're in touch with MB and others that are looking at investing in major events coming to New Zealand. They're in discussions. I mean, for instance, we didn't know then Sail GP was coming on the map. Now you're not a candidate for Sail GP, but if you had, let's say you were on the water and you had that strategy in place, you might say, let's proactively go after that and make sure we're a host in 3 years' time. What do we need to do? If that worked for you and your resources. That's the kind of the idea behind it, is to be more proactive and actually look where the opportunities are and go talking to promoters, go talking to event producers and do that. There are events globally that make that happen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thomas, $6 million is a big amount of money that we have been throwing at this. Has this been presented to us in the course of the long-term plan deliberations?
Yeah, I think we knew coming into this you would get a reaction to that $6 million. I think we need to be pretty honest and transparent that that's across, our resourcing, our staffing and our facilities across the council and the organisation. So it's not just targeted as a $6 million fund with regards to delivering events. And so there's quite a pool of resources in this space.
Madam Chair, is this intended to go out for public consultation, this policy?
No, as I understand it, this was to seek a decision today from the councillors. This doesn't, I don't believe, meet the. It's a strategy. It doesn't. It's not considered significant within the terms of the council's significance and engagement policy. This is a framework that or direction that we're seeking to work for in terms of going forward with our event strategy.
$6 million is not significant?
I think that's a different decision around the amount of that fund. What we're talking about is the strategy to deliver on events here. So,
just reminding councillors, and part of that annual plan discussion last year, and what is included in the draft of the LTP is what we are talking about is, I think, is about $550,000 investment fund that is used to fund these events. That $6 million is described as the whole machinery, staffing, facilities, and the costs associated with regards to events. That obviously covers quite some large, significant venues in our district.
Okay, so we currently have a $500,000 budget, and
To attract events, yes. Yeah.
okay. Lakeside, is that not a signature event in the arts and culture space?
So again, the key for us for the organisation is to get endorsement of this framework. So historically, why we need the endorsement of the framework is therefore when we get the requests for events such as Lakeside and all the rest, we apply it against the criteria and therefore use that criteria to agree to continue it on or not. With regards to Lakeside, yes, that is a key event for our community, and it is one of the events that is supported by this organisation.
I guess if our investment in events goes wrong, it becomes a subsidy rather than an investment. Are we buying events with this fund, or are our facilities able to like, for example, Bay of Plenty Steamers use Rotorua International Stadium, which I understand has a higher fee of $5,000 or something. But if that's just being given away, then we're really buying the event rather than actually selling the event, are we not?
Yes, that's called investment. So value in kind, sorry, just to answer that's exactly right. And that's why it's important to have a policy and a strategy and a strategic framework that you make those decisions within. I mean, at the end of the day, I think, just to support you, $500,000 of attracting what I call bid or attracting funds is not a huge amount when you look at, with respect, the cost of these events to actually stage them. I mean, your tier one events are costing a couple of $1 million plus annually to actually stage. The event managers are, with respect, taking most of that risk, and the event owners are taking most of that risk. Council is merely a contributor to that, to deliver region benefit and district benefit, so economic, brand, community, and the like. So I think you've got to, with respect, probably put it within that perspective. I think that sounds like a good amount of money for a region like Rotorua that has the unique resources you have, and particularly your accommodation network and your capacity to host your manaaki. You're quite an extraordinary district, and you've probably been underperforming, I think, and under presenting yourselves and your capacity to host events that could be of benefit, I think, for the region. You've got extraordinary assets.
So it says here in your draft strategy that Rotorua will also prioritise events that acknowledge and support Te Arawa's goals and visions. Would Bay of Plenty Steamers, for example, fall under that category, or Crankworks?
No, not every event will fall under every category. So it's really important to note again, you need diversity in your offerings, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to assess them in quite a cold, transparent way against all of those criteria and just say, does it tick the box or not? If those events tick the box, you support them or not. And events will come here whether you invest or not as well. So this is not about always writing a cheque per se and investing. It's about saying, what do we want the makeup of our events offering to be in the community? Because you've got broader community objectives as well in terms of local participation, in terms of servicing your community as well, in terms of their own aspirations.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Patterson, followed by Her Worship.
Just a subsequent question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the event permitting office.
Yeah.
I recall in the annual plan we actually agreed to the event permit process. So that's been in place for quite a while now. How is that working?
Kia ora koutou katoa. The event permit process is a work in progress. It needs a bylaw in order to give it teeth, and there's a process to go through in terms of consultation with the community in terms of introducing bylaws. So that's where it's at. There's been quite a lot of work. We've gathered quite a lot of information from Auckland Council in terms of their event permit, and also we've been talking with an organisation that's doing event permitting work in Hastings and in Tauranga currently as well. So there seems to be a shift towards this event permit process, particularly around as it reduces risks for council in terms of their operation, but it's a work in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship, the Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just finding the unmute button. Thank you very much. I just had a further question regarding investment in events. Thomas, you note that it's about 550,000 a year. I just am aware that there are events that have been committed to for a number of years. So Sharon, just wondering if in terms of strategy moving forward, whether that is a usual practice or a wise practice to commit a significant amount of the funding that is available to only a few events. Obviously that doesn't leave us very much left to be able to support and invest in new events, but I am really looking forward to having a strategy in general to ensure that we are delivering the best outcome for Rotorua. But that question again is it usual practice to commit for a number of years? I am aware that in the past when we have had significant music events in Rotorua, there has been contractual agreements there as well between council and the promoters or the organisers, whatever you call it, to ensure that there is sustainability of the event. But again, if we, even with the strategy, if we're committing to a number of years, that will limit future opportunities. So do you have any thoughts or advice on that? Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you for that. So the answer is yes. Tier 1 events, you'll need to look at investing over a period of time, absolutely. 3 to 5 years wouldn't be a surprise to me. It's really interesting if you look at the role of Major Events New Zealand and MB, they have a policy of investing 3 to 5 years. And in fact, I sit on a board of an event that's just been received funding for a further 5 years because of its strategic importance to New Zealand. So there will be times that you will need to make long-term objectives and to renew them. There might be events you invest in for longer because they meet that kind of niche, that they meet those the kind of criteria you've established for yourselves, and importantly, they continue to deliver on it. So I think the most important thing around any investment is not just a one-off arrangement, but actually making sure that they deliver on the criteria you set them, and you have really good metrics and really good reporting and really good assessment of them. Events only receive a kind of subsequent investment if they've delivered for you. In my experience, you're not going to refund something that isn't doing so. Some events you invest in high initially and it tapers off. That's often the best approach for the event managers. It's easier to manage than a drop off. Others you can go the other way as they grow. So it really depends on each of the events. But it's one of the reasons why a small pot of money doesn't go far, sadly, if you're talking about Tier 1 investment.
Thank you, councillors. That appears to be all of the questions in relation to Sharon's report. We also do have in the agenda at page 13, that's the paper around the Rotorua event strategy. So at this stage, could I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report be received? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, that's carried. Are there any questions to Stuart or Andrew or Thomas in relation to the report and the agenda? Or take the report as read. Just give you a minute to go through your papers. Okay. Could I ask for a move and a seconder for the motion that the committee approve the Rotorua Event Strategy 2030? Thank you, Councillor Maxwell, seconded by Councillor Brown. Now open the resolution for discussion. As the mover, Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak first to the motion?
Yes. Many of us, I've heard it on many, having stood in many elections and prior to coming on councils, whenever the topic of events come up, the majority of people talk about that's what they want to see in our city, and I support that, and we've campaigned on that. And you know, we've got also a lot of volunteers out in our own community who also run events and don't call on council funds, but still we get the benefit from it. An example I'll give is Te Arawa Kapahaka. Every 2 years we run the Te Arawa events, and not only the senior ones, but even secondary schools and primary schools, and they pack out the Energy Events Centre. And that's good for us. That's revenue coming into our venues that have been built for us. The stadium, I love seeing it used, and I still dine out with people on the fact that we got 4 World Cup games here back in 2015. And it also helped our sister city in Japan, who sent a delegation out here to find out how did we get 4 Rugby World Cup games, and they went back and they achieved the same. So, yeah, I look at what Melbourne does, I look at what other cities internationally do, and they thrive on events promoting their city, their reputation. Crankworks is a great event that gets us seen around the world. So with that, I wholeheartedly support that, and thank you, Sharon, for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Brown is the seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's fairly straightforward. It's a succinct report in my view, well thought through, well consulted, and it makes sense for the city, tidies up a lot of loose ends, and yeah, fully support it.
Thank you. Is there any? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with your comments, Councillor Brown. I think it's a great idea to have a strategy so that we have a clear set of criteria against which to decide where we're going to place our time and focus. I would just like to flag that I see it as a little bit of a missed opportunity with regard to agribusiness as one of the key sector contributors, and I think as a potential employer and our increasingly attractive region as a place to invest in agriculture and growing, we could build on that, and this would be an opportunity to do this. It's that would have positive flow-on effects on our district as well in an economic sense. So when we make these criteria and don't add in the agribusiness sector, I just think it's a missed opportunity, and that would just be an observation from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Your Worship, the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Look, I really want to support a new investment assessment framework being developed. I think this will also provide certainty to not only the events we tracked from around the country and around the world, but also for our local community as well, so that they can know what to expect and what Council is wishing to deliver, what we're likely to support, and importantly for our community, the benefits that they're likely to see from it too. Look, events are really important for us here in Rotorua. They help drive our economy and they help make us the world-class destination that we are. And it's going to have to be a collective effort between not only the council and our businesses, in particular in hospitality and tourism, but actually in our community as well, and a real opportunity for us to continue to show the manaakitanga, the care and hospitality to those that get to come and enjoy this beautiful district that we live in. So I'm very happy to support this. I want to acknowledge the amount of work that has gone into this over the years. It is time for a refresh, and we look forward to seeing the benefits to come from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tautoko, everything that's been said, Rotorua is a major events hub. It might have taken a bit of a backseat for the last few years, largely due to COVID, but it's time for us to get back in the saddle and drive it forward. I remember from my many years involved in the industry that it just brings so much mana and pride to our community when people come here, they see what we have to offer, they go away, they tell their friends back home that Rotorua is the place to visit, a great place to live, work and play and enjoy events. So absolutely support this, and it'll be great to have a one-stop shop again so we don't miss opportunities. Just one place where you contact, come to us and we'll look after you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Yeah, I think we've had a good round of discussion here. This is an important strategy in terms of our reputation rebuild as well. So it focuses on our unique destination as culturally and our location with the lakes and the mountain biking. It gives us guidance as to how we put that investment into events to build on all of that. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you. Councillor Lee has abstained. Sharon, well, you've got a second part of your report, which is around the commercialisation the venues review. So I'm wondering if we could take that report now. So you've got a presentation, and then I'll come and I'll take the report after that, which has been prepared by Stuart.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. So just a bit of a background again following, I'm just going to see if it's driving. My apologies. Thank you. Voila. Excellent. So just to give you an introduction to the kind of brief, so again, it was a kind of an extension of the work we did around the event strategy, was to actually undertake a review of RLC venues, their associated structure and strategy to deliver on your objectives and your existing destination management and event strategy, to recommend some options for performance measurement and ROI, return on investment, sorry. Dreadful acronyms shouldn't be there, and to develop a venue strategy with any fiscal or policy implications was the kind of brief. So what we did is had a good look at the current data that's collected on venues and the utilisation and financial performance. Had a good look at other councils of like-minded approaches to venues, I guess, around to look how they are managing and dealing with best practice. Had some one-on-one interviews with key staff and leadership, and reviewed the current approach to leadership of our venues. Also looked to develop a dashboard or a framework to assess venues on a like-for-like basis, so you can look at them consistently, no matter what the venue is, and then some recommendations to inform development of some financial models and policy and investment going forward. So that was the kind of work that's been undertaken. So first things first, for the purpose of this report, important to note, we're really focusing on council venues. And at the moment, I kind of decided that you have kind of 5 core venues. Now, your sports fields and reserves are not a venue per se. There are many, but still want to acknowledge them as a group of venues that are a really important part of your venue infrastructure, extraordinary assets that you have here, right through to your energy event centre, the Sir Howard Morris Performing Arts Centre, the Sports Drome, the stadium as well. Currently, we would assess that there is a mixture of community and commercial use. However, only the EEC and Sir Howard Morrison actually have what I would call commercial capability. The stadium and the Sports Drome are actually community sport facilities. And while they may from time to time support a commercial event, the majority of their use is actually for community sport. The forest, while not owned by you, is managed by council, and as such supports both recreational use and major events commercial use, but the commercial benefits of that do not accrue to council, but they do accrue to Brand Rotorua. So important to note them within the venue construct, but it's not appropriate to kind of analyse their commercial return and the like at the moment. I know you separately do assess the value that they do contribute to the region, particularly your brand and destination outcomes. And from a general perspective, therefore, I kind of created this kind of continuum to give you a sense of where we see the venues sitting on that continuum of community use through to commercial. all council venues will always have a community role alongside any commercial use. So you've got no sole just commercial venue only, but the opportunity certainly is there to increase commercial return, but while maintaining community access. So you don't want to do away with the other. It's really important to have balance. That is the role of council. That's where you differentiate from private providers in this space. From a venue performance perspective, we had a good look at the data across the venues, and this first one is, and I'm sorry just to throw this up at you, but the first one is looking at the EEC and utilisation for event days. And so this is using the booking system that's used across most venues except sports, I think except the Forest actually, and it collects information on bookings and records them as event days. Important to note that the current use of the system does not assess utilisation of individual spaces within venues, therefore it's quite a simplistic lens. I just want to say that. So we are limited by the data we have available, but in itself what it shows right now is the EEC is relatively well utilised, but it ranges from 33% in December through to 81% in August. When you include your pack-in and pack-out days, which you charge at half the rental when events come in and pack out, that changes from 57 to 113%, which is that multiple space thing. From my perspective, just it's important to note, I can't give you a lens and a view of the individual use of the 11 spaces within the centre. Not a big deal. It's something could be of value later, but that's not what these numbers tell us. Of the use that we do know, 74% is commercial, 3% is community use, and about 21% is for maintenance and shutdowns currently of the centre. Of the commercial users, 29% are conferences, and that's a mix of corporate, association and international. 13% are sporting events, tournaments, professional and community, and 7 are exhibitions and banquets. That just gives you a sense of the use of the EEC. From a venue performance perspective, the total revenue for the FY 23 that's just finished was 933K. However, it's important to note that a further 392 was provided in discounts to community users and sports tournaments. So that represents, if you add that onto your revenue, that's a 30% of potential rental is currently given in discounts, hence investment and events. Of those discounted, the major beneficiaries were sports tournaments, with 2 receiving substantial discounts. The national sports tournament was discounted 130 for a 30K rental, and an Australasian sports tournament was provided a discount of 200,000, which was a 100% discount on their venue rental, obviously as part of a bid to attract that event to here. So this is consistent with what you would normally do. It's just this useful for you to understand the quantum. That's an example in one FY. So when you look at your investment fund direct and then your indirect supporting, it gives you a sense of your investment in attracting events to here. Discounts of this magnitude are absolutely appropriate, but they just need to be within an overall policy because they're effectively one part of that events attraction investment fund. When we go to the sports drone, I've separated out the sports drone from the EEC. They're actually reported on in a combined way currently, but actually they're quite different. And it's not that it masks the performance of the EEC, but they really need to be treated separately because they're quite different beasts, actually. When it comes to sports drone, hugely used, 38% in April to 173% in August. Lots of people using it in the days. So, in other words, if one person comes in for a day, they're marked as a day. So you could have 2 days marked if somebody else uses it on the same day in the tools. Again, it just gives you a sense of utilisation. The users are primarily community sporting organisations. So these are the same organisations that you look after with your sports fields. They're community sport and national sport organisations that come here that play and recreate regularly and have their activity and/or come in for tournaments as well. Basically, again in this 1 year, 82% of those were community sport organisations and community events. Another 10% was for tournaments or professional use, and the balance of 4% were actually used in association with the EEC for international association conferences. So there is a partial use of it for those big events, but the majority is community sport. The sports drone delivered about 70,000 of rental venue. That was included within that EEC spend in that period. So a well-utilised venue. Shimpak, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because the work's all been done, so I just wanted to acknowledge the work that has been done in the separate paper, so I'll leave that, but just a couple of graphs that I grabbed from the work that were done by the team. Utilisation of the SUR over the period February to September ranged from 30% to 90% utilisation per month. 65% of that use was community use, with rental discounted by 40%, and the majority of tickets were sold within Rotorua. So what a good result for a newly opened centre that takes time to build audience and utilisation. So and really useful to really pleasing to see, in particular te haumako and the box, I call it, just how well that's used. So really clever design that's attracting users, so it should signal some really good future there. So comments overall around venue performance. The two what I call commercial venues are currently underperforming on key KPIs of utilisation and revenue. In other words, there is capacity to attract more users. They have capacity, which is why you look at this, and to achieve those targets. However, as I said earlier, the EEC, that's complicated by combining the venue performance data of the sports dome, which, as I mentioned earlier, was basically community sporting use. Obviously, for the Sir Howard Morrison, its performance currently is due to the fact it's only recently opened. It takes time to build utilisation and revenue. The design of the venue is for performing arts. It's not been designed as a multi-use venue. It's been designed as a performing arts venue, and predominant use is by community at the moment, and as such, lower revenue. Just a comment on the stadium. I haven't done any detailed utilisation data of the stadium because it's not really material, because it's a non-commercial venue. In my view, it's a substandard venue, but it's an adequate sports ground. You certainly would not want to be looking to attract any business events to have there. It's simply not a venue you should be proud of, or it's consistent with your other offerings within Rotorua. So you'd need to make a call. It either needs to, if you want to use it for that, it either needs to have a significant investment to attract commercial events on a regular basis, or you should maintain it simply as a sports ground, and a very good one. And continue to maintain it like that. Obviously, the key drivers for any commercial performance are always the ability to secure conferences and incentives, that C&I, which is led by Rotorua NZ and your own EOC sales team, and performing arts events, which are led by your Director of Performing Arts. So that's the only way you're going to drive and improve that performance. But to do so, the venues must be fit for purpose. So you can't expect those outcomes if you don't invest to have them ready for delivering on those. Yield and margin management is something, again, I haven't gone a lot into, but especially around food and beverage and external supply is really key. I think there's an opportunity to have more cohesive kind of commercial and events attraction and sales leadership across your venues to help drive that, and in particular to really have a really good look at the yield management on some of those kind of outsourced activities. Going forward, consistent data and metrics are really essential. As I mentioned earlier, not all venues use this booking system. The majority do, though. I think it's just the Forest that doesn't currently, but it would be very useful to have every venue, even though you're managing it, to use the same tools and to collect data in the same way, and to look at reporting utilisation on spaces rather than venues per se. So to give that greater granularity, that will be more effective in identifying more latent capacity. Currently, you've got a lot of operations in terms of food and beverage, technical AV and event planning. They're split across your two venues currently. And from my looking in at a really top-line level, there's no real clear connection at this point in time, but in fairness, it's a growing development between the venues and the event strategy. And there was a recommendation around an investment advisory board and permitting officers, which we now have got underway, which is great. They're really key recommendations of the event strategy. Important to note, this report was this year, so I'm referring to when I wrote it, was referring to the report that was written a couple of years ago, just to give you some clarity. So, going forward, what are the kind of considerations that we need to take into account when we consider a future strategy for our venues? Obviously, we have a new council, and I understand there is a focus on greater commercial performance on venues by the council. I think really, really importantly for Rotorua to note is they're in a hugely increased competitor landscape. There are new venues now in Wellington, Christchurch. There's a proposed huge development just right next door in the bay, and in fact a beautiful bespoke theatre in Hamilton. And so the competitive landscape now is materially changed from that of just 2 years ago, and that has a real impact on your venues and their performance and their attractiveness to potential customers. I think we have to give consideration to the current state of the venues, and the EEC, while effective, is tired. It needs a kitchen and it needs some upgrading. The SIR needs to have the business event capability, and the stadium needs to have either major investment or just reposition it, just acknowledge it for what it is and treat it as a sports field. We are very limited in audience here, and I'm sure the team will talk more to this as they look in the more detailed report around the SIR, but that does have an impact on venue performance, and it will have a material impact on the venue performance within Rotorua, and particularly having regard for your local audience where you drive most performance from these centres. While there has been competition within Rotorua, particularly in the conferencing and centre space, my sense now is a very mature market. The Bureau is doing an incredibly good job bringing in events and conferences, and it's being well managed and dispersed amongst the commercial sector as well as the council. I think there's a real level of maturity now that wasn't there probably even a couple of years ago, so it's a credit to everybody there. And that's delivering real benefit for both yourselves, the council venues, but also brand Rotorua. And then there was just a question about going forward, if you're looking to drive economic value out of your venues, where therefore does the responsibility for those lie? Does it rely within council stall, or does it rely within Rotorua NZ? Just to consider, these are just considerations. So what's the opportunity? From my perspective, there's 4 or 5 things I think we could do. One is that be really clear on what are the role of council venues. What is the core objective? Do you want to use these venues, these commercial venues in particular, to drive revenue and brand Rotorua, or is it more important to support community wellbeing through ongoing community use? They're not mutually exclusive. You can do both, but the issue is the degree to which you want to do them has a material impact on the way the venues need to be led and run and the policy to support that call. So you do need to make calls on that. You just can't leave management to take what walks in the door and then say, but you didn't deliver the result that we were asking for. So we need to be really clear on what are the role of these venues. We need to be really clear, therefore, on the purpose of each venue and assess it against that. So if we agree that that's the role and the purpose of that venue, is it fit for purpose? And if not, we need to invest in it and manage it accordingly. We need to be really clear about what our key performance indicators are, what are the KPIs, and apply them to all consistently. Make sure they're aligned to destination, commercial contribution and community wellbeing outcomes. What are the KPIs that matter, and be really clear around them. In order to do that, we need some really good policy to support it. So if we want this mix of community commercial use, what's your policy on that? And how do you manage that, and the like, how do you manage yield? And there's some good recommendations coming up around that. But that's required for staff and users as well. Users need to know as well what those policies are. I think there's a real opportunity to have a more, what I would call, a curated and produced offering for clients to drive value add and increase yield. With the competitor landscape changing, there's, your customers of many years are going to go looking at the new venues and the new offerings. So how do you counter that? And it's about being a bit clever, looking at your value add, and how do you, instead of walking the door and booking a venue, how do you help create and curate an experience and actually do what the private sector does very, very well. So it's really something to consider and to drive that value. And obviously the opportunity is to always look for greater efficiency and performance, but delivering on council objectives as well as aligning to policy. So lots of opportunity, but just a little bit of thought to be done to give real clarity and direction to the staff in particular. So therefore, some recommendations. So the first ones are around contribution to your own outcomes. So the first recommendation I have is that council actually determine the primary role of these venues, and that my recommendation is you do so on the basis that they are to generate revenue for council and as a direct contributor to regional economic development, but with a secondary role to contribute to community engagement and wellbeing. So if that is your intention, be clear about it and say primary to drive revenue and return, secondary to support community. Be really clear and direct the team accordingly. My recommendation is that the ESC and Shimpact be managed as commercial venues with priority placed on the use for those purposes in support of your event strategy and in growing the performing arts sector in Rotorua. So again, being consistent with your other policies. You've now adopted an events policy strategy, so they should be managed to deliver on those. That the sports dome actually be managed as a community sport venue, and that we don't mix the drinks with it, with the exception of occasional use in support of major events. But actually note that it is a community sports venue and manage it as one. That the Rotorua International Stadium be managed as a community sport venue with occasional use for major events, but only where the economic benefit outweighs the one-off overlay costs to bring it up to standard. So right now, if you bring in these major events into that stadium, you've got to invest in what I would call an overlay. You've got to bring in elements and features and overlay to deliver it to the standard that it needs to support that event. That comes at a cost. So don't do that unless the benefits outweigh that cost materially. Otherwise, you're just kind of standing still, so to speak. In terms of performance and KPIs, the recommendation is that we establish KPIs for each venue, including utilisations. That would be across all venue spaces by month, by user type, and reporting on community versus commercial use. On revenue and profitability, so against budget, your average margin on F&B and contracted services and the discounts is provided. So that's a core metric to measure. And that we measure contribution to brand and destination Rotorua. So where relevant, the number and value of bed nights, visitors versus residents, region, country of origin. So 2 or 3 key metrics within each of these consistently reported against. And finally, one that I know that the teams do, but I'm not sure how much they're reported to council, but I think it's really important to have a clear KPIs around customer satisfaction. How good a job are we doing, not in the eyes of ourselves, but in the eyes of the customers who are paying. The people that we're attracting, and we assess them against, the visitor experience, the value delivered through their lens, not ours. do they believe they've received value? Food and beverage quality, experience, venue quality, important measure for you to keep track of whether it's up to scratch, and the customer process, the experience that they had on their customer journey. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, recommendation is that all venues be managed using the same booking system, and that includes community sports facilities, commercial and the forest, and that we implement the event strategy recommendations, freeing up current investment to actually deliver that greater return. Also important, just to reiterate, that any event attraction and bidding should leverage existing facilities and open space, but that does not require expensive duplication of venue or overlay. Just as a recommendation there. And so this is I tried to give you a sense of what a dashboard would look like. Sometimes a picture paints 1,000 words. So just the idea is that, what would a report that would come to council quarterly that could say, here it is, here's a dashboard, one glance, look at utilisation, community commercial use, financial performance, brand and destination, and customer satisfaction. So a really simple dashboard that you can look at and say, we know how it's tracking, and we're looking at everything consistently, and all venues the same. From a policy perspective, it's really important as well that we have the right policies in place to support this work. So that means we need a really good policy around venue use, and it should be probably reviewed every couple of years, not annually. Bit of a nightmare. 2 to 3 years would be appropriate. And that the policy should be really clear around the purpose of, as you talked about earlier, each venue. So what percentage should be made available for community use? Land on it. And achieve, so that we know that we can say, well, the community invested, community use, the criteria for which they'll be made available for one-off events, and that's about that event calendar overlay and cost overlay, the process by which yield is managed, with preference given to commercial use of venues and the impact on this on community use rental, the use of discounts, how they should be applied, and i.e. considered as part of an investment and bid as part of an event attraction / investment fund, and other matters to ensure consistent management. So important to have clear policy in all of these spaces. So the staff don't have any confusion, and they don't have to make calls on their own. It's not fair. They should have clear direction. And then separately, this idea of an event attraction investment fund, a bit of a reset I guess, that we talked about an operation of advisory board to help make decisions on that council services and facilities that can provide VIK in support of them should be clearly understood. We should be really clear on the purpose and prioritisation of the fund's investment. Again, supporting driving brand and destination railway in off-peak seasons. If we're trying to fill gaps, let's focus the fund on that to support key economic and sector outcomes. The relationship with other policy, of course, and then other matters to ensure consistent use of what are really limited resources. So just a need to do that. From an investment perspective, lastly, I think this is the last one, it's really saying that, once you know what your policy is, then you need to, and your purpose, and you're really clear on that, we need to assess the venues of their current state to make sure they're fit for purpose. And good development plans need to be written for them, outlining the work required to bring them up to spec, and a plan and investment to do so. For example, EEC needs a kitchen, and a general presentation needs to be brought up to scratch. The stadium should be just maintained for sports field purposes only. Shimpak, and EEC invest in AV technical to enable multi-use and maybe to grow margin in that space if you're currently using external providers. For instance, these are just some examples. Certainly it's important that investment attraction fund be well established or re-established, drawing on prior experience, but be adequately resourced to support the attraction of events. But if you don't back that up with a marketing fund, you're not going to get the benefit of the investment. So you not only need to attract and invest in events, but then you need to market them and let the world know you have them on your doorstep. And there's an obligation on you to do that, not just the event promoters to do so and the event investors. So if council's going to get the biggest return, investing in marketing of them as well is pretty important. In particular, the Sir Howard Morrison will need substantial marketing investment to get the venue known and to get it used. It's an extraordinary venue, absolutely stunning. I congratulate you on it. As a chair for 8 years of the New Zealand Dance Company, I can tell you, had the venue been here, we would have come here many more times, and I think in fact we did just recently, and not under my chairmanship, I'm sorry. But this is the kind of venue that performing arts in New Zealand are looking for, but there's a big job to do to market it and to get, and there's a long lead time, 3 to 5 years to get her up to the state that she's going to be sought after. It takes time to establish that reputation and to build those clients, both in New Zealand and importantly internationally. And that was it. I guess the next steps is for council to consider the recommendations, develop those dashboards with consistent metrics, develop that policy, and develop that case for investment, just as we outlined. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Sharon. Now, just councillors, just for your information, Sharon's done a lot of work here. These are just recommendations. We're not asking councillors to make any decisions on these recommendations today. This was just to utilise the breadth of Sharon's expertise and knowledge to present this in conjunction with the event strategy so that you could see how the event strategy tied in with the venue. So I think what we do have coming later is the strategy around the yield policy for this Howard Morrison, which is a separate issue which will be dealt with by Stuart and by Thomas. So whilst we've got Sharon here, if there are questions around this presentation, remembering there's no decisions to be made about this, but we'll take questions on this, and then I think we'll take the morning tea break and we'll come back and do the Sir Howard Morrison yield policy after the morning tea break. So we'll take questions at this stage. Councillor Brown followed by Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Another great report. A lot more on this one. Did you consider, or should we consider, a third-party commercial supplier to manage our events? Was that part of your consideration? Is it something that we should think about?
No, I didn't, and I don't believe you should, because I think they're your venues, and the thing that differentiates them from other venues in a 100% commercial model is that you've got obligations for community use, and that appropriately resides within council. So I had not thought about that. I mean, that's a model that's applied mainly, it's not as common with venues of this genre. It is applied very commonly across swimming pools and other facilities, believe it or not, but not in my experience of this, and I hadn't considered it and don't know that would be an appropriate, but it's something that would need to be looked into, I guess. To be honest with you, the work has not been done on that.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again. Another great report. The Events Advisory Board, is that something akin to what Events Rotorua was back in the day that I was involved in many years ago when Tim was in charge of Tourism Rotorua?
It was thank you. It was a recommendation back in the event strategy about establishing a kind of an interdisciplinary advisory group that could make decisions on an event investment, because you need a number of lenses. You need a commercial lens. You need a lot of specialist expertise around major events and assessment of them and their criteria and the like. So it was merely about saying, remove it from one person having to make those calls. It's not something that should sit with just one person. It needs to be an interdisciplinary consideration, because there's lots of outcomes you're looking for. So you'd need representation from your destination managers and your economic leaders, as well as your venue and your events leads as well. So that's where that idea came from. It was to have a kind of a really good expert group that could make those informed decisions with all the right expertise at table, not just leaving it to a venue manager or a head of a discipline to make a call on such a material investment decision.
Fair enough. And just subsequent question. There's a certain amount of tension in Rotorua between community and commercial use of our venues. We simply don't have enough to meet the needs for both. Looking at what's going on around the rest of the country, we may lose some of our commercial opportunities. I heard a thing in the last fortnight, Wellington was crowing that within 6 months of their new convention centre open, they'd already generated 24 million in revenue. Now, whether that's the council or the city, 24 for the city would be rather low, so you would think it would be for the council in the space of 6 months. My question along those lines is, did you do any forward thinking given that we're in the LTP at the moment, to say, does Rotorua actually need to have another venue that's actually designed fit for purpose for conferences in particular, if we're going to stay in this market?
No, I didn't, but that would be a sensible piece of work for council to consider doing, because the reality is the competitor landscape is going to be a real challenge to you. But I guess I focused on the immediacy, things you can do right now, irrespective. I mean, you're still doing really well. You're not doing poorly. You could do better, but we know what the limitations are. You've known probably for some time what the limitations are. So it's probably around your appetite for investment. There's no question the value that these venues are delivering to brand Rotorua and destination Rotorua. Likewise, other private operators and hotels are also delivering, I might add. So the question for you is just that when you get to that point of tension that you can't meet community demand, that's going to be a broader conversation that you're going to have to ask yourselves around what does your community expect of council and the provision of community space in particular.
Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon G. Brilliant reports. Thank you. I want to comment on the Sportsroom International Stadium at Sir Morrison Centre. I'm pleased that you're recommending the community use for the Sportsroom, because basketball has just grown. We received some reports a couple of months ago just how much it's grown and everything. I know that they've been asking for an extra court or something, but I mean, they're working through some of their issues. The International Stadium also recommending that it could be even more community use. I think that's good, so the utilisation. The question I have on the Sir Howard Morrison Centre is, have you found that we've always been urged to increase the Sir Howard Morrison Centre to 1,000-seater, and we have, and I was pleased we did. Has that made a difference? Have you noticed it's made a difference with promoters who do want to bring their shows throughout the country, and we're on the radar?
I don't have that.
Oh, that might be Stuart.
Stuart can answer that question. Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Maxwell for the chair. Look, certainly has made a difference. We certainly wouldn't have saw Bill Bailey here recently. It's sold out. We've got a couple of other shows that we've been certainly well above the 660 odd seats we used to have. We probably would have not seen those shows because they're not commercially viable for promoters to bring numbers here for that sort of size. So no, definitely we're seeing the benefits there, and we'll continue to see that grow over the next 3 to 5 years, is what Sharon said.
Pleased to hear that, Madam Chair, and because we had a function over there for our council's BA5, and I grabbed some of the promotions you had on the rack, and I thought we were being left off one major show going throughout New Zealand, and that was the Michael Jackson review show. There were about 30, 40 venues they're going to in New Zealand, but we were on there. I had to have a good look, and we're on there. I thought that's an example of, I think we made the right decision before. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I think we've had a good discussion. Can I thank you, Sharon, very much for the work that you have done in relation to this report, and obviously got a lot of food for thought and a lot of work ahead of us in terms of the recommendations that you're suggesting that we look at. I'd suggest that we take the morning tea break now and we come back at 11:15, please, councillors. Thank you. Line? No. Okay. Councillors,
Kia ora, everyone.
Kia ora, Councillor Wang. We're now going to move back to the agenda. So can I just ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, Commercialisation of the Sir Howard Morrison Centre? Thank you, Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, that's carried. Over to you, Thomas and Stuart, to overview the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So obviously we've just had a very comprehensive presentation from SVG that has outlined a number of recommendations that also overlap with regards to the Sir Howard Morrison Centre. And I think as an organisation we need to take of those and work through some of those recommendations and what those implications are. And I think within the report that you have, we'd actually engaged a separate expert out of Auckland that was helping us with regards to lifting the commercialisation of the Performing Arts Centre, and has a number of options within that. I think in light of the SVG recommendations, where we are currently with regards to our constraints with our long-term plan in particular, I think we as an organisation just need to go away and consider how we bind all those together and come back to you, which is why we are suggesting that we ask the Chief Executive to report back. However, what we do need to help with regards to the utilisation of the facility, in particular around the challenge that you've set us with regards to increasing its commercialisation, is for the committee to approve the yield policy, which will then give guidance to our staff with regards to how we can manage the events and maximise both commercial returns, while also ensuring that appropriate and access for our community is there as well. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I'll just take some questions if there have any, but just from the Chair's perspective, there was an original recommendation in the agenda that went out, which was to endorse the commercialisation options, and there were a number of options that were presented in the paper. However, I will be proposing that we are just dealing with the community use policy rather than looking at all of the other options around commercialisation, and that we ask the Chief Executive to report back in the new year on the delivery plan, which will include looking at all those other options, because I don't think that's necessarily a discussion that we need to have today. So the only thing that we need to be signing off, or I'd be seeking endorsement for today, would be around paragraph 4.1.2, which is the commercial use vis-a-vis the commercial use overrides or takes precedence over community use if a booking is not confirmed until 3 months out. So with that, I'll take questions around the report to both Stuart and to Thomas. If there are none, I can take the report as read. Councillor Maxwell? I'm taking questions at this stage, Councillor Maxwell. Any questions? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm playing catch-up here, obviously, as we all are, I think.
Sorry, okay, so we're on page...
I've got 4.1.2. Look, I think just in terms of practical terms, how do you deal with the tension between commercialisation and community use? What's the policy, and what would be the policy in place, if this is the appropriate time to ask this, on dealing with the conflict? You know, because we want to see the community use it, but we also think, as we've heard from Sharon, it's a beautiful facility with 1,000 seats and we can sell it out. So how, in practical terms, do you deal with deciding or informing the different groups on who takes priority?
Through the Chair, currently there is no policy, so it's pretty much first come, first basis. With commercial shows or promoters approaching the Sir Howard Morrison, they tend to come 3 to 4 months lead times. And, you know, at the moment, for instance, we would have several community bookings a year out right now. and so we could miss some commercial opportunities if we accept those bookings currently. So the new policy recommends that the commercial promoters are prioritised, and that we work with our community in terms of finding alternative dates for their shows or use.
So just to expand on that, so the way that would be done is therefore signalling to those community events that you're penciled in and you have that date, but it's actually not confirming that date until an agreed period. And so what happens is, and we have that tension at the moment, where there's a couple of community events that are on the same date where a commercial operator wants to run an event, and so what we would do is, in an agreed time, and I think it might be 3 months out, we would confirm that booking, and if there was a commercial event that wanted that same date, we would work with the community group with regards to finding an alternative date. And there's a belief that with regards to particularly community events, with regards to advertising and selling tickets and all those sorts of things, it generally happens in that small window before the event. And so by giving them that period of time, they're still able to successfully deliver their event.
Subsequent. So in that 90-day policy, I think I've heard from in the process of this review is that that's a normal policy, and it's something that's acceptable in other areas of the country.
Yes, and speaking to Sharon and her experiences, even rather large events in Auckland that you would think are commercial are on that same basis with regards to you have 3 months and then you will get confirmed, but if there is something that provides a larger yield or whatever, then yes, we will facilitate a new date. Yep.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So instead of setting down a percentage, saying, right, 60% commercial, 40% community, what you're saying here is that it'll be based on that 90-day lead-in time. So it's more flexible from a commercial point of view. There is not going to be a guaranteed percentage for community or commercial.
No, we're not recommending that right now, Councillor, but within the paper it does recommend that we review this in a couple of years' time. So as the facility builds up its utilisation, particularly with promoters getting to know that it have audiences here, then you may want to have a look at that again in a couple of years. But right now we don't have that much pressure on community versus commercial at this point, but it will come.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? That's right. That's right, Councillor Maxwell. Stuart, could you just confirm then, just for the community's benefit, they will still have access to the venue at the community rate, but we'll just need to make sure that we are 3 months out before their booking is confirmed, so that there still is the opportunity for the community to be able to use the space, but with that perimeter.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. On that basis, I am going to I'll move the recommendation, which will be slightly different from the one that's in the agenda. The original one asked us to endorse all of the options in the paper. I'm going to suggest that we just note those commercialisation options rather than endorse them, and that we instruct the Chief Executive to come back in the new year on the delivery plan, which can then look at all those other options. And secondly, then I've suggested that we insert into number 3 above, that when we're talking about the Sir Howard Morrison Centre yield policy, just to make that clear, that is paragraph 4.1.2 in your paper. So I'm happy to move the recommendation that's up there. If I can have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We'll now open that up for discussion. As the mover, I can speak to this first. So I think as a new council, we came in with a very clear direction through the annual plan that we wanted to look at commercialisation of our venues, and this was a step in the process of ensuring that. So you can see that we've done an awful lot of work in engaging Sharon, the extensive work and report that she's done in looking at both the event strategy, the venues, and also this policy around commercialisation. We've heard from Stuart that most commercial events confirm within a very short window, and this gives us the opportunity to ensure that we are maximising the income but still allowing the community to have the use of the venue. So nothing else has been looked at this stage. All we're simply doing is saying that there is an opportunity for a commercial operation to come in, have the venue confirmed, to ensure that we can maximise our revenue from that, but still make the venue available on another date in conjunction with consulting with that community group. And so I'm happy to endorse that recommendation, and with the Chief Executive to come back in the new year to report on a significant number of things. So there are a number of recommendations that Sharon had reported in that second report that we heard from her. We've also got some other work to do around the event strategy, so I think that there is still more work to come, and that's why this particular recommendation focuses just around the community use vis-a-vis the commercial use when there is a clash in a booking, and so happy to support that. So with that, Councillor Patterson as the seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just makes sense to give our commercial operators the opportunity to get in and secure their bookings so that we can reach the desired outcomes that we set ourselves during the annual plan. At the same time, it doesn't take away the opportunity for our community groups to enjoy that facility that the ratepayer invested a significant amount of money into. So while we're getting our return, we're still keeping it balanced so that our community groups can get involved as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Your Worship, the Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just want to endorse your comments. The Sir Howard Morrison Centre is a really important venue for our community, but it is also a multi-million-dollar facility. So these things do come at a cost, and we do need to make sure that we are supporting it to be as sustainable as possible so that we can continue to allow it to be operational and open for community events as well. I know we often talk about within commercialisation the economic benefit, but we need to also remind ourselves that part of that is community wellbeing. It is ensuring that we are providing jobs, it is ensuring that we're supporting the wider economy here in Rotorua by attracting significant events. You know, it was great to now have it at 1,000 seats. I look forward to continuing to attract excellent national and international performances there. But we do, as we have heard today, there is still, of course, the understanding of how important it is to support the community events. This is how I see us being able to do that moving forward in the most sustainable and prudent way possible. So I do support what you have recommended today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be supporting the motion, and with the corridor that you gave earlier, I think that's a good way to go. But I just wanted to ensure that we add that the community use be a really good, strong consideration, and it requires good management. I'm really pleased. I believe our venues have good management led by Stuart and Jolene and all the people involved, and it's working with our communities on this because deep down we have to always remember that the venue was built back up again by generous grants by people like Sir Owen Glenn, 4 million, and NZCT put $1 million in, and it was for ensuring community use. And the last thing we want to do is upset that balance. But I think we're going about it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. If there are no other councillors that wish to speak against the motion, I'm now going to put that motion. So I'm going to read it because it is different from the agenda. So we're now noting the commercialisation options for the Sir Howard Morrison, and we're instructing the Chief Executive to report back to Council in the new year on the delivery plan, and that we approve the introduction of the yield policy, which is in paragraph 4.1.2, to prioritise commercial higher yield shows over lower yielding community shows. I've moved it. It's been seconded by Councillor Patterson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. And thank you, Sharon, for coming down to present today. Thank you, councillors. We will now move to page 40. I'll give you a minute just to get to the report. We are going to go to the progress report for the Community and District Development Committee. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder that that report be received? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. That is carried. Just mindful of time, so I'm going to take the report as read. Unless, JP, there's anything really pressing that you need to draw to our attention.
No, that's the right pathway. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
So, questions for JP on pages 40 to 58? I just have a quick one, JP. Police action now for people that are standing in the middle of the traffic islands with signs or window washing on the Pack and Save McDonald's corner.
Yes, Madam Chair. We've had, I suppose it's part of that discussions of some of the challenges we've got across the city that are daily discussed in the hub with the various partners. So the police have looked at the safety issues. So we've written to NZTA and asked them for their opinion about the safety issues in those intersections, which are genuine safety concerns. That it is a very distracting behaviour, people dipping in and out of traffic to either wash windows or with their signs and collecting money. So there is a safety issue there. The police, when they've got available time, are infringing people. And my understanding there has actually been an arrest this week of one of those people.
Thank you, JP. Any further questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thomas, JP, I'm interested in the DNA for animal control. In the last month or so, I've had 4 chickens killed and a daughter attacked and bitten on the face. So I'm a little bit interested in using DNA for animal control, and how does that work? What can you tell us?
Thank you, Councillor, and yeah, very sad if there has been some dog attacks that have been involving your family or certainly your chickens. We're obviously not seeking to use it as where it's clear. So really where there's ambiguous circumstances around if there's multiple dogs involved or a lack of clarity from either the witness or the owners as to which dogs were involved and which caused the problems. It just becomes another part of that investigation procedures. There is a cost to it, but it is really important, and as a consequence of using it in a trial, it's supporting us with a prosecution that we're currently undertaking. So just like the normal DNA testing that's done in criminal circumstances, swab from a bite wound can be taken and that can be matched to a dog that has made that attack. So that's the evidential base we're now using to categorically identify where there's ambiguous information about what has happened. So it's really intended for us to support prosecutions.
Okay, is it able to be used on, for example, chickens or other animals? I mean, I don't know the details of how you collect DNA.
Yeah, look, I would say probably, but I think probably the best thing I can do is refer you through to Mihi, who's probably leads that team, and might be able to give you some more certainty about whether that would be the right approach in the circumstances. So, yeah, Mihi can certainly give you that information. So outside this meeting, we can certainly follow up on that.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, JP. Just under the 2 properties that we're looking at divesting ourselves of, 283 Clayton Road, my understanding was that had fallen through. Now it says here that is okay.
Yeah, I don't know where you picked up that it had fallen through. What we've done was postponed the settlement. So that is an iwi trust. Two iwi trusts come together to purchase that to build some housing on. Their relationship was also seeking funding through Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to support that. So they asked for an extension. So they've progressed. So we're now getting very close to just having that settlement date in place and them to be able to lodge their consents.
Oh, that's great news. Okay. And 61 Kawaha Point Road, when are we getting close to announcing who the partner is?
Yeah, very good. Good point. It's been some time since we agreed who was the preferred negotiation partner around that RFP process. I need to check in with the staff on that, so you're absolutely right. We should be concluding that and announcing it, and if not, then clearly we haven't managed to negotiate through to a settlement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, JP. Looks like that's all the questions. It's a very detailed report, so perhaps if I just encourage people to read the report online, and that covers an extensive amount of activity. So thank you, JP. Moving now then to the Corporate Services report. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the Corporate Services Progress Report we received? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Seconded by Councillor Brown. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, carried. Once again, we have a report. Thomas is here to overview that report. I'll take the report as read. So councillors from page 59 onwards. Just need a minute to see if you have any questions in relation to this section. No questions? Doesn't appear to be any. Thank you very much, Thomas. That was easy for you. And that now concludes the Community and District Development Committee meeting. Councillor Kiriopa, I had you down as doing our closing karakia. Are you still able to do that for us?
Sure. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, kia tau whai o tō tātou ariki o iku karauti. Forgot the rest of it. Aroha mai.
Kia aroha, kia atua. Me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, ake. Amen.
I'm Tanya, but I'm well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kiriopa, Mayor Tapson and Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed. Just councillors, I think we'll just check with the process now. We'll take a luncheon break till 12:30 and then we'll commence the infrastructure.